The discovery, hook, and suspense. In the vast emptiness of space, where stars flickered like distant fireflies and planets spun in silence, a small group of alien salvagers made their way through a forgotten sector. Their ship, the Driftstone, cut through the cold void, its engines humming softly as it navigated through asteroid fields and wreckage from ancient battles. The salvagers had one goal: find valuable technology to sell, and perhaps a few rare artifacts from civilizations long gone. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid well. But today, something was different. The scanners on their ship lit up with an unusual reading, an energy signal far stronger than anything they had ever encountered. It was coming from a region that had been considered a dead zone, a place where the records showed nothing but empty space. But now, there it was, a signal, pulsing faintly but steadily. "Captain," one of the crew members said, staring at the readings in disbelief, "we're picking up something huge. This doesn't look like a normal wreck." Captain Zorax, a tall and grizzled alien with sharp features, walked over to the console, his eyes narrowing as he studied the data. "What do you mean, huge? Can you confirm its origin?" The officer hesitated, his fingers dancing across the controls as he tried to get a clearer picture. I'm not sure. It's ancient. The energy signatures are unlike anything in the galaxy. It's like it's from another time, or maybe another civilization." Zorax's heart began to race. In their line of work, they had seen countless derelict ships, some ancient, some modern, and all of them valuable in their own right. But this felt different. There was something eerie about it, something that stirred a deep, unsettling feeling in the pit of his stomach. "We need to check it out," Zorax ordered. "Set a course for the signal. Prepare the crew for boarding." The Driftstone altered its trajectory, moving closer to the mysterious source. As they neared, the salvage team's anticipation grew. What they didn't know was that the very ship they were about to board wasn't just an ordinary relic. It was a human supercarrier, an ancient vessel that had been lost to time, a creation of human ingenuity far more advanced than anything the salvagers had ever seen. The supercarrier lay in the shadows of a nearby moon, its massive form barely visible against the backdrop of deep space. It was enormous, larger than any ship the alien crew had ever encountered. Its hull was sleek and covered in a strange metallic alloy that seemed to absorb the light around it, giving it an almost ghostly appearance. The salvage team stared in awe as they approached, their minds racing with thoughts of the treasures they might uncover. But there was also fear. The ship appeared abandoned, but in the vast, dark silence of space, who could say what dangers it might hold? "Hold your position," Zorax commanded, his voice calm despite the growing unease in his chest. "I'll take a team and board the vessel. The rest of you stay here and monitor our progress." The crew quickly suited up, their boots clanking on the metal floor as they prepared to disembark. Zorax led the way, his weapon at the ready, though he knew better than to trust in weapons when dealing with the unknown. They had seen ancient ships before, but nothing like this. This wasn't just a ship. It was a mystery, a relic of a lost era, and it held secrets that no one had uncovered in centuries. The docking procedure was smooth, and soon the airlock hissed open. Zorax and his team stepped into the supercarrier's dark interior. The temperature inside was perfectly controlled, and the ship seemed to be in better condition than they had expected. Despite its age, it looked almost brand new, as if the passage of time had no effect on it. They ventured deeper into the heart of the ship, their footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. The walls were lined with glowing panels that flickered intermittently, casting an eerie light on the polished floors. Strange symbols, unlike any they had seen before, adorned the walls, and there was a palpable sense of mystery in the air. Zorax paused, looking around. "What is this place?" he muttered to himself. The further they ventured, the more they realized that this was no ordinary ship. The supercarrier was not just a weapon of war. It was a fortress, a marvel of ancient technology that even the most advanced alien civilizations would have been hard-pressed to replicate. Its power systems hummed faintly, and the crew could sense that it had once been the pride of its creators. But where was everyone? The ship seemed abandoned, yet everything was intact. The Salvagers began to feel the weight of their surroundings, a feeling that grew stronger with every step they took. It was as though the ship was watching them, waiting for them to make their move. And perhaps in some way it was. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the ship. It was subtle at first, but it quickly grew louder, vibrating the very air around them. The walls of the Supercarrier seemed to shift ever so slightly, as though it was coming alive. The Salvagers froze in place. Zorax turned to his crew, his voice barely a whisper. "Did you feel that?" Before anyone could respond, a cold, mechanical voice rang out from the ship's internal systems. "Who are you? What do you seek?" The words were clear, but the tone was chilling. It was as if the ship itself was aware of their presence, as if it had been waiting for them. The crew exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to do next. Zorax's grip tightened on his weapon, but he knew that this was no ordinary encounter. They had stumbled upon something far greater than they could have ever imagined. The ship had awakened, and they had just become a part of its story. The first encounter. The Salvagers stood frozen, their breaths shallow and quick as they stared at the dark corridor ahead. The voice, cold and mechanical, seemed to hang in the air, making the space feel even more oppressive. Zorax's hand tightened around the grip of his weapon, but his instincts told him that this was no ordinary threat. It was as if the ship itself was testing them, probing their intentions. "Did you hear that?" One of the crew members whispered, her eyes wide. Her hand hovered near her communication device, but she hesitated to make contact. Something told them they shouldn't make any sudden moves. Zorax motioned for the team to stay quiet. His gaze was fixed ahead, trying to make sense of the ship's eerie voice. It was a voice they didn't understand, yet it felt strangely familiar, like it had been waiting for someone to answer. Slowly, Zorax raised his hand and spoke, his voice calm but with an edge of uncertainty. "We seek knowledge," Zorax said carefully, trying to keep his tone respectful. "We come in peace." The air around them seemed to grow colder, and the lights in the corridor flickered. A low hum vibrated through the floor, almost like the ship was responding to Zorax's words. Suddenly, a panel on the wall flickered to life, revealing a holographic display. The image was of a human face, with short dark hair and intense eyes. The face was stern, but there was a calmness to it, as though it had been recording information for centuries, waiting for someone to unlock its secrets. "Humanity," Zorax muttered under his breath. He'd heard of humans, of course. Many aliens had, though they were long thought to have perished after their war with an ancient enemy. The records were vague, filled with mystery, and no one had seen a human in generations. The hologram's lips moved, and the voice from earlier spoke again, though this time with a hint of something more organic, more human. "Identify yourselves," the voice demanded, its tone growing firmer. Zorax's heart raced. He had never felt such pressure from a ship's systems before. This wasn't a simple automated response. This was something alive, intelligent, and deeply aware of its surroundings. It was as though the ship had its own consciousness, one that could sense their every move, their every thought. "We are Salvagers," Zorax replied cautiously. "We come from the planet Sorath. We seek knowledge and technology. We meant no harm." The holographic figure stared at them, its eyes scanning each member of the team as though it was reading their very souls. The silence in the corridor grew deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's internal systems. For a moment, there was no response. Then the voice spoke once more, this time with a slow, deliberate tone. "You seek what you do not understand. This vessel, this relic of humanity, was meant for a purpose far greater than mere technology. It is the last of its kind, and it will not be taken lightly." Zorax felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The ship was aware of them. Truly aware. It knew they were trespassers, yet it also seemed to recognize their presence as something significant. The Supercarrier had been dormant for centuries, but now it had awakened, and it was choosing to communicate. "What is this vessel?" Zorax asked, his voice trembling with curiosity. "What is its purpose?" The hologram flickered, and the image of the human face was replaced by another, a map of the galaxy, with various sectors highlighted in glowing red. Zorax leaned forward, studying the map closely. It showed routes and patterns, star systems, and planets he had never heard of before. "This ship is the final legacy of humanity," the voice explained. "A weapon, a protector, and a monument to the civilization that once stood strong against its enemies. It was designed to safeguard the galaxy from destruction." Zorax's brow furrowed as the realization struck him. The Supercarrier was not just an ancient vessel. It was a weapon of unimaginable power. And now it was up to them to decide what to do with it. Before Zorax could process the full weight of the ship's words, the ship suddenly shifted again, a loud mechanical sound echoing through the halls as though it was alive. The air around them seemed to grow heavy, and the temperature dropped rapidly. "We must leave," Zorax said urgently. "This ship is more than we bargained for. It's dangerous." But before they could retreat, the voice spoke once more, its tone more insistent now. "You will not leave, not without completing your trial." The lights dimmed, and the entire ship seemed to shudder as if it were preparing for something. The Salvagers looked around in confusion, their eyes wide with panic. What trial? They hadn't come for a trial. They had only come to scavenge. The holographic display blinked again, and a new image appeared. A massive chamber, filled with strange machines and devices. The walls were covered in ancient symbols, and in the center of the room stood a pedestal, glowing faintly. "Find the key," the voice commanded. "Prove your worth, and the legacy of humanity will be yours. Fail, and you will never leave this place." Zorax's heart pounded in his chest. The Supercarrier was not just a ship. It was a test, a trial, one that they had unknowingly signed up for. The Salvagers had no choice but to follow the ship's demands. The key was the only way out, but they had no idea what it truly was, or what they would have to face to find it. The silence that followed was deafening. The Salvagers shared nervous glances, unsure of what to do next. And then, as the ship's mechanical voice echoed one final time, they knew there was no turning back now. Unearthly technology. The Salvagers stood in stunned silence, their breaths quickening as the ship's voice faded into the eerie hum of the Supercarrier systems. The command to find the key hung in the air like a heavy fog, its meaning unclear but its urgency unmistakable. Zorax, though shaken, knew they had little choice but to follow through. This was no ordinary ship, and the consequences of failure were far too great. "We don't have a choice," Zorax muttered, his voice low but firm. "Let's move." The team, still uneasy, followed Zorax as he led the way deeper into the ship. The corridors were vast and empty, their walls lined with smooth metallic surfaces that seemed to reflect the light in strange ways. As they walked, the Salvagers couldn't help but feel as though they were being watched. Every step seemed to echo in the silence, each footfall like a loud warning to the ship's unseen inhabitants. It was almost as though the ship itself was alive, aware of their every movement. As they moved forward, they reached a large chamber, the doors opening with a soft hiss as they approached. Inside, the Salvagers were greeted by a sight that made their jaws drop in disbelief. The room was filled with technology the likes of which none of them had ever seen before. Ancient machines, sleek and glowing with a faint blue light, were scattered across the chamber. The air was thick with the scent of metal and old machinery, but there was something else, something more unsettling. A strange energy buzzed in the room, almost as if the technology was still active, waiting for something to trigger it. Zorax stepped forward, his heart racing as he surveyed the vast array of strange devices, The walls of the room were covered in intricate symbols and markings, lines and shapes that seemed to move and shift, as though the technology itself was part of some living, breathing entity. "What is all this?" one of the crew members asked, his voice barely above a whisper. This is beyond anything we've seen before." Zorax nodded slowly, his mind racing. They had encountered old technology in the past, bits and pieces of long-lost civilizations, but nothing like this. The machines before them seemed to hum with a power they couldn't even begin to comprehend. He approached one of the glowing consoles, and as his fingers brushed against it, the panel flickered to life. A series of holographic displays erupted from the surface, swirling around him like an intricate dance of light. The symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, their patterns shifting and interlocking in a way that suggested a kind of order, a purpose. "These are human devices," Zorax muttered, studying the displays with a mix of awe and fear. "But they're far more advanced than anything we could ever build. Even the most advanced civilizations we've encountered would never have created something like this." The rest of the team gathered around him, each of them staring at the holograms in disbelief. Some of the machines seemed to serve no obvious function, while others were clearly weapons, massive cannons and energy shields that could obliterate entire fleets in an instant. But even those seemed like relics compared to the strange technologies they couldn't quite place. Devices that could warp space itself, communicate across light years, and perhaps even alter time. "This ship, it's a weapon," Zorax said, more to himself than to his team. "But it's not just any weapon. It's a supercarrier, a floating fortress, and it seems to hold the key to something far greater than war." Suddenly, a low rumble shook the floor beneath them. The lights dimmed, and the air grew colder. The machines around them seemed to hum louder, and the holographic images flickered. For a moment, Zorax thought the ship was reacting to their presence, as if it was testing them again. His hand instinctively went to his weapon, but he didn't draw it. He knew this wasn't about combat. This was something else. One of the crew members, a younger alien named Rylus, stepped forward cautiously. He had a natural curiosity, always seeking to understand the unknown, and his eyes were wide as he approached one of the strange machines. "Captain," Rylus said, his voice filled with wonder, These devices, they're not just tools. They look like keys." Zorax's heart skipped a beat. "Keys," he repeated, glancing at the machine Rylus was pointing to. It was a large cylindrical object, glowing faintly with a soft blue light. There were intricate markings etched into its surface, similar to those on the walls of the ship, and the moment Rylus's hand made contact with it, the entire room seemed to shift. The hum of the machines intensified, and the symbols on the walls began to rearrange, forming new patterns. A hidden door in the back of the room slid open with a loud hiss, revealing a narrow passage that seemed to lead deeper into the heart of the supercarrier. Rylus stepped back, startled. "What just happened?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Zorax's eyes were fixed on the now open passage. He could feel the weight of the moment. The ship had just revealed something to them, something that could lead to the key the voice had spoken of. But he knew this was no simple journey. This was a test. The ship wasn't just showing them a path, it was giving them a choice. "We follow it," Zorax said firmly, his voice steady despite the uncertainty he felt. "We move forward. The key is down that path. It's our only chance." The team nodded, and together, they made their way down the narrow passage. The walls were lined with the same glowing symbols, and the air was thick with the strange energy that seemed to pulse from the ship's very core. Every step they took brought them closer to the unknown, closer to the secrets that the human supercarrier held, secrets that, if unlocked, could change the fate of their galaxy. But as they moved deeper into the ship, Zorax couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The ship's systems had already proven to be far more intelligent than anything they had encountered before. And now, they were following its instructions, not knowing what would happen next. One thing was certain. They weren't just searching for a key anymore. They were searching for answers, and the ship was ready to test their every decision. The Supercarrier's defense awakens. The deeper the Salvagers ventured into the human Supercarrier, the more they felt the weight of its ancient presence pressing down on them. The strange energy that hummed through the ship now seemed to pulse with an almost ominous rhythm. It was as if the ship, once a dormant relic, had awoken to something, or someone, that it recognized. Something, or someone, worthy. Zorax's mind raced. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being tested at every turn, pushed further into the ship's core, as if it were trying to see how far they would go. The further they walked, the more the ship seemed to shift around them. The walls, the corridors, even the air itself seemed to change with every step. The narrow passage they had entered led them into another large chamber. This one was different, far more menacing. The walls were made of a dark, almost black metal, and they were lined with what appeared to be massive weapons. Massive cannons mounted into the walls and rows of what looked like turrets, waiting for an enemy to approach. Their surfaces glowed faintly, as if they were dormant, waiting for some command to bring them to life. "We need to be careful," Zorax whispered, his voice filled with caution. "This place feels wrong, like it's not just a ship anymore. It's a weapon." His crew nodded in agreement, their faces tense with a mixture of awe and fear. They had seen advanced weaponry in the past, but nothing like this. The sheer scale of the ship, and the power it radiated, made their weapons seem like toys in comparison. The energy in the room grew stronger, and the Salvagers could almost feel the ship's pulse. It wasn't just power, it was alive. Suddenly, the entire room shook. A deep, grinding sound echoed through the chamber as a series of loud mechanical clicks echoed through the air. The Salvagers froze, their eyes wide with panic, as the weapons on the walls began to hum to life. The floor beneath them vibrated, and a heavy door on the far side of the room slid open. Out of the darkness emerged a new threat. Automated drones, sleek and terrifying, soared into the chamber. They were humanoid in shape, but their design was far more advanced than anything the alien Salvagers had ever seen. Their armor gleamed, reflecting the dim light in the room as they approached with unnerving precision. Zorax instinctively reached for his weapon, but it was clear. These drones were no ordinary machines. Their bodies were covered in thick, metallic plating, and their hands were armed with weapons capable of piercing even the toughest of materials. They didn't just look like machines. They were the guardians of this ship, programmed to protect it at any cost. "Hold your fire," Zorax shouted, trying to keep his crew calm. "Don't engage unless we have to." The drones moved closer, their movements synchronized, as though they were part of one mind, one force. They stopped just short of the team, their glowing eyes scanning the crew with unnerving accuracy. It was almost as though they were sizing them up, trying to determine whether they were a threat. Zorax's pulse quickened as he realized that these drones weren't just guarding the ship, they were part of it, extensions of its will. Then, a new voice, different from the one they had heard earlier, filled the air. It was cold, mechanical, and emotionless. "Intruders detected. You have violated the sanctity of this vessel. You will be eliminated." Zorax's heart skipped a beat. The ship's defenses had been activated, and now it was clear. The crew wasn't just dealing with ancient technology. They were up against a system built for war. And if they didn't act fast, they would be destroyed. Without warning, the drones raised their weapons, and the room erupted in a blaze of energy. The Salvagers scattered, their weapons drawn, but it was clear that their tools were no match for the Supercarrier's advanced technology. Zorax barely managed to duck behind a nearby pillar as a burst of energy shot past him, singing his suit. "We need to get out of here," one of the crew members shouted, their voice panicked. "We're outmatched." Zorax's mind raced. They couldn't fight these machines head-on. There had to be another way out, another path to take. His eyes scanned the room, looking for anything that could give them an advantage. Then he saw it, a control panel at the far side of the room, barely visible behind the drones. If they could reach it, they might be able to disable the defenses, at least temporarily. "Rylus, with me," Zorax barked. "The rest of you, hold them off." The crew began to scatter, using the pillars and debris as cover while they fired at the drones. The beams of energy exchanged between the two sides filled the room with flashes of light, but it was clear the drones were far superior in terms of speed and accuracy. The crew's shots bounced off their metallic armor, doing little more than slowing them down for a moment. Rylus and Zorax dashed toward the control panel, their feet pounding against the floor. The drones quickly noticed their movement and turned to intercept. But the Salvagers were faster. They slid behind a pillar just as the drones opened fire. The energy blasts ricocheted off the walls, but they made it to the control panel in one piece. "Stay down," Zorax muttered, breathless. He quickly began to work the controls, his fingers moving over the panel with expert precision. Come on. Rylus looked up, his eyes scanning the room as the drones advanced. "Hurry, Captain. They're closing in." Zorax could feel the pressure building. His fingers moved faster, trying to unlock the ship's systems. The drones were only a few meters away, their weapons raised, ready to fire. Zorax's hands were sweating as he worked, every moment feeling like an eternity. Finally, with a sudden click, the control panel flickered, and the drones froze. Their glowing eyes dimmed, and they staggered, like a machine running out of power. Zorax exhaled in relief, his heart still racing. "We did it," he whispered, almost in disbelief. But even as the drones powered down, Zorax knew this was just the beginning. The Supercarrier had shown its true face, and it was clear that they had only scratched the surface of its defenses. There was far more to come, and they had to be ready. They had angered the ship, and it would not let them leave without facing the consequences. As the team regrouped, Zorax couldn't help but wonder, what had they really awoken? What other dangers did this ship hold? And most importantly, could they survive long enough to uncover the key that could unlock its mysteries? The Supercarrier's defense awakens continued. As the Salvagers stood, catching their breath in the tense silence that followed, Zorax couldn't help but feel a knot tighten in his stomach. The drones, now deactivated, lay motionless on the floor. Their once menacing forms, still gleaming in the dim light, now looked like lifeless husks of machinery. But Zorax knew that this victory was only temporary. The ship had shown them its power, and it wouldn't stop here. "We've only scratched the surface," Zorax muttered to Rylus, who stood beside him, still visibly shaken. "The ship's defenses are far more advanced than we imagined. It's only a matter of time before something worse comes after us." Rylus nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "Captain, we need to find the key. Fast. If this ship keeps reacting like this, we might not make it out alive." Zorax scanned the chamber, his mind racing. There had to be more to this ship, more to the Supercarrier's power. The drones were just the beginning. What other weapons did the ship have hidden away, waiting for the next challenge? "We need to move," Zorax said, his voice low and determined. "The key is somewhere in this ship. We're not leaving without it." The crew, still recovering from the sudden attack, quickly regrouped. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. The ship's defenses had already been triggered once. Who knew what else lay in wait? As they cautiously moved forward, Zorax kept a wary eye on the dark corners of the room, his senses alert for any sign of movement. They reached a narrow hallway that led deeper into. When the light finally faded, the room was silent once more. The pedestal was now gone, replaced by a large, intricate symbol embedded in the floor. The key was no longer there. Where did it go? Rylus gasped, his voice filled with confusion and fear. Zorax's mind raced. It was gone. The key, the one thing they had risked everything for, had vanished. And worse, now they were deeper in the ship than ever, with no idea of what awaited them next. But the answer came soon enough. A low rumbling sound filled the air as a new presence made itself known. The chamber's walls shifted, revealing a massive mechanical structure, one that looked like a cross between a weapon and a guardian. It was a massive, humanoid machine, towering above the crew, its body covered in plates of blackened armor. Its eyes glowed with an intense blue light, the same light that had been emanating from the pedestal. It was a guardian, and it was not happy. Zorax's heart sank. The ship had been testing them, and now they had triggered its final defense. The massive guardian took a step forward, its feet pounding the floor with a deep, resonating thud. Its massive hands reached down, fingers curling into fists, ready to strike. The Supercarrier's final line of defense had been awakened, and it was intent on making sure the Salvagers would never leave. The crew scattered, diving for cover as the Guardian raised one enormous hand, ready to bring it crashing down. Zorax's mind raced, desperately trying to think of a way out. But there was no time for hesitation. A moment of desperation. The massive Guardian towered over the crew, its glowing eyes scanning them with an almost unnatural intelligence. Its armored body creaked and groaned as it shifted, its movements slow but deliberate, each step causing the ground to tremble beneath the Salvagers' feet. Zorax's heart pounded in his chest as he looked around desperately for a way to escape. The key was gone, the pedestal had vanished, and now they were faced with the Supercarrier's final defense, a machine designed to destroy anything that dared trespass. "Take cover," Zorax shouted, his voice sharp and urgent. The crew scrambled, diving behind the pillars and debris scattered throughout the chamber. The Guardian's hand shot forward with terrifying speed, slamming into the floor with a force that sent shockwaves through the room. The Salvagers ducked, narrowly avoiding the crushing blow. Zorax barely managed to avoid being flattened by the sheer weight of the strike, rolling to the side just in time. The Guardian's eyes glowed brighter as it raised its other hand, preparing to strike again. Zorax quickly scanned the room, looking for anything that could give them a chance. The walls were lined with the same glowing symbols as before, and the strange energy from the pedestal still hummed in the air, but nothing in the room seemed to offer an immediate escape. "We need to stop it," Rylus shouted, his voice filled with panic as he fired a few shots at the Guardian. The blasts bounced harmlessly off its metal frame, leaving only a faint echo in the air. The Guardian didn't flinch. Its attention remained fixed on the crew, and it began advancing, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground with each step. It was slow, but every movement was deliberate, its massive form towering over them, as if it had all the time in the universe to destroy them. Zorax's mind raced, and then it hit him. The energy from the pedestal, the hum that had filled the air when the key had disappeared, it was still there. Whatever had caused the pedestal to vanish had activated something deep within the ship. The Guardian, with all its power and might, wasn't just a machine. It was part of the ship's defense system, controlled by the very energy that now pulsed in the air. "We need to disrupt the energy," Zorax shouted to his team, trying to rally their spirits. "We've got to take down the power source." The crew exchanged uncertain glances, their fear palpable. But there was no time to hesitate. If they didn't act fast, they would be nothing more than a footnote in the Supercarrier's long history of destruction. "We've got to get to that control panel." Zorax pointed toward a small, glowing console on the far side of the room, tucked beneath the raised platform where the Guardian had emerged. "It's the only chance we have." The crew nodded grimly, their fear temporarily pushed aside by the adrenaline rushing through their veins. Zorax was the first to make a run for it, dodging between the pillars and debris, his weapon raised in case they encountered more drones or other dangers. The others followed close behind, each of them moving with a mix of urgency and caution. The Guardian, however, was not easily distracted. As Zorax and his crew made their way across the room, the giant machine raised its hand, sending another shockwave through the floor. The air grew thick with energy as the Guardian's enormous fist came crashing down toward Zorax. "Look out!" Rylus shouted. Zorax dove to the side, rolling across the floor as the ground shattered beneath the Guardian's attack. The force of the blow was so powerful that it sent the surrounding pillars collapsing, showering the area with debris. The Salvagers were forced to scatter again, their movements desperate as they tried to stay out of the Guardian's reach. But Zorax wasn't about to give up. His eyes locked onto the control panel, just a few meters away. He could almost feel the ship's energy pulsing through the air, and he knew that it was their only hope. With a fierce determination, Zorax sprinted toward the panel, his crew following behind. The Guardian was turning, its massive body shifting to follow their movements. But they were close. So close. "Get to the panel. Now," Zorax barked. Rylus and the others followed his lead, pushing themselves harder, ignoring the pounding of their hearts as the Guardian's enormous form loomed ever closer. Zorax reached the control panel first, slamming his palm against it. For a moment, nothing happened. The panel flickered, then went dark. Zorax's heart sank, his desperation growing with each passing second. Then, a soft beep echoed through the chamber. The screen on the panel flickered back to life. "I think I've got it," Zorax exclaimed, as a series of glowing symbols appeared on the panel. "The ship's core is linked to this control. If I can overload it, it should deactivate the Guardian." The crew gathered around, holding their breaths as Zorax worked the controls. The symbols on the screen shifted, moving faster and faster as Zorax's fingers danced over the panel. The hum in the air grew louder, the energy growing more intense with every second. "We don't have much time," Rylus shouted, looking over his shoulder. The Guardian was moving toward them again, its massive feet shaking the floor. Zorax's fingers flew across the controls. The ship's systems were complex, but Zorax had spent years learning how to manipulate advanced tech. He just had to trust his instincts. With one final press of a button, the control panel lit up brightly. A loud, mechanical sound echoed through the room as the energy around them began to destabilize. The Guardian let out a low mechanical groan as its movements slowed. "Now," Zorax shouted. The crew ducked behind the pillars as the room erupted with energy. The Guardian's body trembled, its joints locking in place as the power that had controlled it began to shut down. The glowing blue light in its eyes flickered and dimmed, and with a final, explosive burst of energy, the Guardian collapsed to the floor, its massive form crumpling like a broken machine. The Salvagers stood in stunned silence, their chests heaving as the silence returned. The Guardian, once a powerful, unstoppable force, was now nothing more than a deactivated shell. Zorax wiped the sweat from his brow and looked at his crew. "We did it," he said, his voice low but filled with relief. "But we're not done yet. The key is still out there, and we have to find it before it's too late." The Supercarrier had shown them its most dangerous weapon, but it had also shown them something else. The price of discovery was high, and the road ahead was far from safe. They had won this battle, but the true test was still to come. The dark past of humanity. The Salvagers stood in the aftermath of the battle, their breath still heavy as they surveyed the massive, deactivated form of the Guardian. The air around them hummed with the residual energy from the explosion that had brought the machine down, but the silence that followed was even more deafening. The Supercarrier's defense systems had been temporarily disabled, but it was clear that the ship had far more to reveal, and not all of it was friendly. Zorax wiped his brow and glanced over at his team. The crew was exhausted but resolute. The battle against the Guardian had been brutal, but they had survived, just barely. However, the true nature of the Supercarrier was still a mystery. They hadn't found the key, and the ship's strange, ominous energy continued to pulse through the walls. There was more to uncover, and they had no choice but to press on. "We need to move quickly," Zorax said, his voice determined but weary. "We've seen what this ship can do, and it's not going to let us walk out easily." The team nodded, and together they ventured deeper into the ship. The further they went, the more the ship seemed to reveal itself. The walls were adorned with ancient murals and symbols, many depicting scenes of war, battles, and destruction. The murals seemed to tell the story of a great struggle, one that spanned across galaxies and threatened to wipe out entire civilizations. As they moved through the halls, they came upon a large chamber that was unlike anything they had seen before. This room was vast, and in its center stood a large holographic display. The hologram flickered to life as the crew approached, revealing a stunning image, a galaxy map with various star systems marked in glowing red. The map shifted, showing what appeared to be a vast network of war fleets, battles fought in the name of survival, and a constant march toward an unknown goal. Zorax stepped forward, his heart racing. "This is it," he whispered. "This is the history of humanity." The hologram continued to shift, revealing images of human ships, massive vessels, like the one they were on, engaged in battle with an alien enemy. The enemy was unlike any they had ever seen before, a terrifying, monstrous race that seemed to engulf entire star systems. Their ships were massive, their technology advanced, but they lacked the precision and intelligence that the humans had mastered. "Humanity fought a war for survival," Zorax murmured. "A war against a force so powerful that it nearly destroyed them." The hologram zoomed in on the final images, the aftermath of the war. The human fleet, once vast and powerful, was now shattered, and their homeworld, Earth, was lost to history. The survivors had left behind their greatest creation, the Supercarrier, as a final weapon, a weapon capable of protecting what was left of humanity's legacy. "This ship was built to be a weapon," Zorax said, his voice filled with awe. "A weapon that could fight back the alien invaders and, if necessary, destroy entire fleets. It was humanity's last defense." One of the crew members, Rylus, looked troubled. But if humanity lost, why leave behind such a weapon? Why create a ship that could end up in the hands of others? Zorax didn't have an answer, but as he studied the hologram, something clicked in his mind. The Supercarrier had been designed not just as a weapon, but as a legacy, a final message to the universe from humanity, a civilization that had been all but destroyed. And now, it was up to the Salvagers to decide whether they would honor that legacy or exploit it. Suddenly, the hologram flickered, and a new figure appeared. This one was different, a human figure, standing tall and proud. The face was familiar, though Zorax couldn't place it, but there was something about the person's eyes. They were filled with a strange mix of sadness and resolve. "I am Captain Area Vance," the hologram said, her voice clear but filled with sorrow. "If you are seeing this, then you have found the final legacy of humanity, the Supercarrier. Know that we did not choose this fate. We fought with everything we had, but in the end, the war was too much. Earth is lost, and we are no more. But we left behind this ship, not to be a weapon of destruction, but a monument to our survival. The key you seek is not just power, it is a reminder that humanity fought, and that we will never be forgotten." The hologram flickered again, and Captain Vance's face seemed to fade into the shadows. The last words she spoke seemed to echo in the room. "The key is not for you to wield. It is for you to understand. And if you are worthy, it will reveal itself to you." The room fell silent as the crew processed the information. Zorax's mind spun with the implications. The key wasn't just a tool for control. It was something more. It was part of humanity's legacy, a message that transcended time and war. "We need to find it," Zorax said, his voice steady despite the weight of the revelation. "The key isn't just about power. It's about what humanity left behind, a lesson in resilience, in survival." "But why test us?" Rylus asked. "Why make us go through all of this?" Zorax paused, his gaze fixed on the flickering hologram. Maybe humanity wanted to ensure that those who would find their legacy were worthy of it. The Supercarrier isn't just a weapon. It's a test, a way of proving that the survivors are the ones who can carry their message forward. We need to honor that legacy. We can't abuse it. With a deep breath, Zorax turned toward the rest of the crew. We move forward, but we do it with respect. The key isn't about power, it's about understanding. The Salvagers now knew the true purpose of their journey. It wasn't just to uncover ancient technology. It was to understand the story of humanity's rise and fall, and to honor the sacrifices that had been made. But the journey was far from over. The ship still held secrets, and the key was still out there, waiting to be unlocked. The final choice. The room hummed with an almost tangible energy, the words of Captain Ariavance echoing in the minds of the Salvagers. The message was clear. The Supercarrier wasn't meant to be used as a weapon of power and destruction, but as a monument to humanity's resilience. The key, the last piece of their legacy, was not for those who sought conquest, but for those who would honor their struggle. Zorax stood still, his eyes fixed on the hologram, deep in thought. His crew watched him, waiting for him to speak, to make the decision that would shape the rest of their journey. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They could no longer treat the Supercarrier as just a valuable piece of ancient technology. The ship had a purpose, a message, and the key was the final piece of that puzzle. "We've been given a choice," Zorax said finally, his voice heavy with the weight of responsibility. "We can take the power for ourselves, use it to dominate, to conquer, to gain wealth and control. Or we can honor what humanity left behind. We can carry their legacy forward and share their message of resilience with the galaxy." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The allure of the Supercarrier's power was undeniable. It was a weapon unlike anything they had ever seen, capable of changing the course of entire civilizations. But now that they understood the purpose behind it, the question was no longer about how to wield it. It was about whether they should at all. One of the crew members, Varen, stepped forward. He was the youngest of the group, but his eyes were sharp and full of determination. "Captain," he said, his voice steady but uncertain, "I understand what you're saying, but what if we could use this power to prevent the mistakes of the past? What if we could stop wars, bring peace to the galaxy, and protect those who need it?" Zorax turned to face him, considering his words. "That's the temptation, Varen. We could do great things with this power, but we could also cause untold destruction. Humanity fought this battle not just to survive, but to ensure that their mistakes wouldn't be repeated. The key isn't just about power, it's a test. It's asking us whether we're worthy of what they left behind." Rylus, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "But can we just walk away from it? Leave it here, hidden, as if it's a relic of the past? What if we're the last ones who can unlock its true potential? What if we're the ones meant to shape the future?" Zorax met his gaze. "And what if we're not? What if humanity's legacy was never meant to be wielded by anyone again?" There was a long silence as the crew took in Zorax's words. The weight of the decision was more than any of them had anticipated. This wasn't just about survival or wealth. It was about the fate of the galaxy and the future of a species that had long since fallen. After a few moments, Varen spoke again, his voice quieter but resolute. I think the key is meant to be shared. Not controlled, not hoarded, but understood and respected. The message humanity left behind wasn't about domination. It was about surviving against all odds. It was about proving that, even in the face of destruction, there's always a way forward, a way to rebuild, to learn, to grow. Zorax nodded slowly, feeling the truth of Varen's words settle in his chest. He turned to face the rest of the crew. "You're right. The Supercarrier is humanity's gift, not for domination, but for understanding. We'll honor that gift. We'll take the key and protect it, but we will not use it for power. Instead, we will use it to ensure that humanity's story isn't forgotten, and to help others learn from their mistakes. The crew stood in a circle, their decision made. The ship that had once seemed like an unstoppable weapon now felt different to them. It was no longer a tool for control. It was a symbol of humanity's strength, their ability to overcome even the greatest of challenges. "Then we move forward," Zorak said, his voice steady and full of conviction. "We take the key and we leave this place. We honor humanity's legacy by sharing their story with the galaxy, by ensuring that no one ever forgets the sacrifices they made. We won't let their message be lost to time." As the crew made their way to the center of the room, where the key was now revealed once again, they knew that their decision would change the course of their lives, and perhaps the galaxy's future, forever. The Supercarrier had tested them, and they had passed. But the real journey was just beginning. The key, glowing softly in the center of the chamber, pulsed with a quiet power. It was no longer just an object of desire. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that, no matter how dark the past, the future was still theirs to shape. As Zorax reached out and took the key into his hands, he felt a surge of energy, not of control, but of understanding. He knew that humanity's legacy was now his to protect, and with it, the chance to forge a future that honored their struggles and triumphs. And with that, the Salvagers turned to leave the Supercarrier behind, not as conquerors, but as stewards of a message that would echo through the stars for generations to come.